The front door creaked open, but it wasn't the usual sound of a key turning in the lock. It was the sound of something more, something that didn't belong. She paused, heart pounding, her breath shallow. The house she had known for years now felt strange, distant. There was an unsettling silence in the air. Her fingers clutched the edge of the doorframe, and for a moment, she wondered if she was imagining it. Was she letting her suspicions get the best of her? Maybe she was overreacting. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The scent of lavender, which usually greeted her at the door, was missing. It was replaced by something colder. Something sterile. She felt it creeping up her spine, the unmistakable sensation that you're being watched. That someone, or something, was waiting for you. She stepped further inside, her eyes scanning the familiar surroundings of her home. The hallway stretched ahead, bathed in the soft glow of the afternoon sun filtering through the windows. Nothing looked out of place at first glance, but the hairs on the back of her neck stood up anyway. Her mind raced with the thoughts that had been consuming her all day. The note. The strange phone calls. The way her husband had been acting lately. Had he been hiding something from her? And why was her mother acting so distant? She hadn't meant to come home early. The plan had been simple. A normal day at work, a quick trip to the grocery store, and then back home to relax. But when she'd received that text from her friend, things had changed. It was the kind of message that made her blood run cold. I think you should come home early today. Her friend hadn't said why, but it had been enough to make her change her plans on a whim. And now, here she was. Her pulse racing, every sense heightened as she slowly closed the door behind her, the latch clicking shut with a hollow sound. As her footsteps echoed down the hall, she tried to push the fear from her mind. She had no real reason to suspect anything was wrong. She trusted her husband. She trusted her mother. But the nagging feeling wouldn't leave. The text. The phone calls. The whispers. It was all adding up to something that felt off. She could feel it in her bones. She turned the corner into the living room, and that's when she heard it. Whispers. Faint, but clear enough to send chills crawling up her spine. They can't know. It's too late now. Her breath caught in her throat. She froze, unable to move or speak. The whispering wasn't coming from the TV or the radio, it was coming from the other side of the room, just beyond the hallway. It was muffled, as if someone was trying to keep their voices low, but there was no mistaking it. She felt her pulse quicken. Her instincts told her to turn around, to walk out and pretend she hadn't heard anything. But something deeper urged her to stay, to push forward and uncover whatever secret lay hidden behind that soft, conspiratorial tone. She took a step forward. Another. And then another. With every step, her heart thudded louder in her chest, her body growing heavier as if the very air was pushing against her. The whispers grew louder, clearer. She was so close now, so close to understanding what was happening in her own home. And then, just as suddenly as they began, the whispers stopped. The silence that followed felt suffocating. Something was wrong. Her eyes darted around the room, scanning every corner, every shadow. Nothing looked out of place. The couch, the coffee table, the bookshelf, everything was where it should have been. And yet, there was a presence in the room that she couldn't explain, an unease that clung to the air like smoke. Her breath was shallow now, every exhale trembling as she moved closer to the source of the sound. She reached the end of the living room, the door to the study just ahead. She could hear her own heartbeat in her ears, each pulse louder than the last. With a shaking hand, she reached for the door handle. It felt cold under her fingers, sending a jolt of electricity through her veins. She turned the handle slowly, her breath held in anticipation. The door creaked open. And there, standing in the center of the room, was her mother. But it wasn't just her mother. There was someone else in the room with her. Her husband. Both of them were standing near the desk, their backs to her. Her mother was talking, her voice low, almost as if she was trying to keep something secret. And her husband, her rock, the man she thought she knew better than anyone, was nodding along, looking different. His posture was stiff, his face pale. He didn't look like the man she had married. He looked like someone else entirely. Her mind raced. Why were they here together? Alone? What was going on? Before she could take a step forward, her mother turned, her eyes widening in shock. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Her face was a mask of confusion and something else, something like guilt. Then, her husband turned. His eyes locked with hers, and for a moment, the world seemed to stop. His face was a mixture of fear and something else, something darker, something she didn't recognize. And in that moment, she knew. She wasn't supposed to see this. Whatever this was, it wasn't meant for her eyes. The pieces of the puzzle she had been trying to put together all day suddenly clicked into place. The note. The strange phone calls. The tension between her and her husband. The cold distance from her mother. Her suspicions hadn't been unfounded. And then, as the silence stretched, the words finally came. "We need to tell her, don't we?" her husband whispered, his voice strained. Her mother didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned away, her face contorted with a mix of sadness and regret. The weight of the moment seemed to press down on them both. "Maybe we should have told her sooner," her mother finally said, her voice breaking. "Tell me what?" she whispered, her throat tight, her body frozen in place. Her husband met her eyes, his own filled with something she couldn't quite understand. "It's not what you think," he said, but the words felt hollow. They didn't make sense. Nothing made sense. Her breath caught in her throat. The room seemed to spin. The truth was just within reach, but it was too much to grasp all at once. What were they hiding from her? The answer hung in the air, just out of her grasp, like a shadow lurking in the corners of her mind. She could feel the truth coming for her, but she wasn't ready to face it. Not yet. But she would. She had to. And as the first part of the truth began to unravel, the only thing she knew for sure was this. She wasn't the person she thought she was anymore. And nothing in her life would ever be the same again. The room felt like it was closing in around her. Her husband's gaze was distant, his expression unreadable. And her mother, standing just a few feet away, looked like she was already mourning something, even though nothing had been said yet. I don't understand," she whispered, her voice trembling. She couldn't look away from their faces. She had to know the truth, no matter how painful it was. "What is going on? What are you two hiding from me?" Her heart was racing, every beat hammering in her chest like a drum. Her head was spinning, trying to piece together the fragments of what she'd just seen. Her husband's uncomfortable silence. Her mother's distant gaze. The whispers she had heard moments ago. They didn't add up. Her husband opened his mouth as if to speak, but then paused. The tension between them was unbearable, thick as smoke, hanging in the air like a storm about to break. Her mother shifted uncomfortably, her eyes avoiding her daughter's. She was the first to speak. "Honey," she said softly, her voice filled with something that sounded like regret, "there are things you don't know. Things that have been going on for a long time, and we, your father and I, we didn't want to burden you with them." Her mother's voice cracked, but there was a weight in the words. She had heard those words before in other contexts, about things that were better left unsaid. But she had never heard them from her mother. Not like this. Not with this kind of heaviness. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her mind racing, struggling to catch up with the growing sense of dread in the pit of her stomach. Her mother took a deep breath, as if steeling herself for something she had been holding inside for years. She looked at her husband, who nodded slowly. "We should have told you a long time ago," her mother said, her voice barely a whisper. "But we didn't know how. We didn't know if you'd be able to handle it." "What didn't I know?" she demanded, her voice rising, frustration bubbling up in her chest. Her head felt dizzy, and her hands trembled as she clutched the edge of the desk. The cold metal felt grounding. But it did little to calm the storm inside her. She needed answers. She needed to understand. Her mother and her husband exchanged another look, one that spoke volumes without saying a word. A look of fear. A look of shame. A look that made her blood run cold. Finally, her husband spoke. "It's not that simple," he said, his voice tight. "There are things that—" "No," she interrupted sharply, her pulse racing, her hands balled into fists. "I'm done with this. Just tell me, damn it. What's going on? What's the secret?" Her husband closed his eyes for a moment, as if trying to summon the strength to say the words. When he spoke again, his voice was low, heavy with guilt. "We've been keeping something from you. Something that changes everything." She felt as if the ground had been ripped from beneath her feet. "What do you mean? What could be so bad that you couldn't tell me?" Her mother stepped forward, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "It's not what you think. It's not what we wanted for you. It's just—" She stopped, choking on her words, unable to finish the sentence. Her husband reached out and gently took her hand, his fingers cold against her skin. "You deserve the truth," he said quietly. "But it's going to hurt. We've made mistakes. Big mistakes." She looked down at their hands, his touch somehow grounding her, but it didn't calm the storm brewing in her chest. She had to know. She had to hear it. But a small part of her, a part she could hardly admit to herself, was terrified of what the truth might be. Terrified of what it might mean for her. "Tell me," she said, her voice barely a whisper now, as if the words were too heavy for her to speak any louder. Her mother wiped her eyes, took a deep breath, and nodded. "We should have told you years ago. But we didn't. And now we're paying the price." The silence that followed was deafening. Her heart was in her throat as she waited for her mother to speak, to explain. The air felt thick, suffocating, as if it were pressing down on her, urging her to listen carefully. "We've been living a lie," her mother said, her voice cracking. "Your father and I, we aren't really your parents." Her mind went blank. She blinked, trying to process the words that had just been spoken. What? What did she mean? She shook her head in disbelief. "What are you talking about?" Her voice was a frantic gasp, as if the world were suddenly tilting on its axis. "You're my mother. My father is—" "No," her husband interjected, his voice sharp. "That's not true. Your father, he's not your biological father." Her breath hitched in her throat, and for a moment, the room spun. Everything in her mind crashed together, colliding like a car wreck. Her mother's words. Her husband's confirmation. The whispers she had heard earlier. It didn't make sense. None of it made sense. "What are you saying?" she whispered, as if the words themselves would break her. "Who am I?" Her husband swallowed hard, his face pale. He couldn't meet her eyes. "We weren't honest with you. We should have told you years ago, but—" "No," she cut him off, her voice breaking as the reality of his words sank in. "What do you mean, not honest? Are you telling me that I'm not your daughter? That I don't belong here?" Her mother reached for her, but she stepped back, her heart pounding. The air felt cold, like she had been dropped into an abyss. Her hands shook as she tried to hold herself together. "I'm sorry," her mother whispered, her voice filled with sorrow. "We were trying to protect you, but now it's all unraveling." Her world, everything she thought she knew, was collapsing in on itself. The foundation of her life was shaking, and she had no idea how to stop it. She looked at her husband, her mother, feeling an overwhelming sense of betrayal, but more than that, she felt lost. "I need to know everything," she whispered, the words barely escaping her lips. "Tell me everything." Her mother nodded slowly, her eyes filled with tears. She seemed to be weighing her words, deciding how much to reveal, how much she could bear to say. Finally, she spoke, her voice heavy with regret. "Your real father. He's someone we both knew," she said, her voice faltering. "He was someone we thought was dead. Someone we thought was lost forever." Her mind reeled. Dead? Lost forever? Her mother's next words shattered her entire world. "Your biological father is the man you've been suspicious of all along." She couldn't breathe. Her chest tightened, and she felt a rush of dizziness flood her head. It was as if everything in her life, every truth, every moment, every memory, had been rewritten in an instant. Her husband. The man who had shared her bed, her life, for years, wasn't just her husband. He was something far darker, far more complicated. The truth was more twisted than she could have ever imagined. Her real father wasn't dead. He was alive. And standing in her living room. The room felt like it was spinning. She couldn't keep up. Her mind was running in circles, trying to piece together everything she had just heard. Her biological father was alive, and he was standing right there in front of her. She had suspected something for a long time, but never in her wildest dreams had she imagined this. Her breath came in sharp gasps, her heart thudding in her chest as if it was about to explode. She staggered back, her legs unsteady, as the words her mother had spoken echoed in her mind. "Your biological father is the man you've been suspicious of all along." No. No, that couldn't be right. It couldn't be. It was too unbelievable, too far-fetched. She blinked rapidly, trying to focus. The world around her seemed distorted, like she was watching a scene from a dream, everything blurry and out of place. The faces in front of her were nothing more than blurry silhouettes now, her mother, her husband. They were her parents, weren't they? Her husband, he couldn't be that man. She had trusted him. Loved him. But now, everything was slipping through her fingers like sand. "Please, just tell me the truth," she whispered, her voice strained. "Tell me everything." Her mother, standing in front of her, shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Her father, her real father, remained silent too, his face a mask of sorrow, guilt, and something else. Fear? Regret? It was impossible to tell. He wasn't looking at her, his eyes focused on the floor as if he couldn't bear to meet her gaze. She took a step back, trembling. "Is this true?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're telling me that the man I've been married to, he's my father?" Her husband finally spoke, his voice low and hesitant, barely audible. "Yes. I never wanted you to find out this way, but it's the truth. I never planned for any of this to happen, but it did." The words hung in the air, thick with tension. She could barely process them. Her husband wasn't just her husband. He was her father. The room felt suffocating. The walls seemed to be closing in, pushing her further into herself. She needed space. She needed to breathe. She turned quickly, her hand reaching out for the doorframe to steady herself. "I can't do this," she said, her voice cracking. "I need to go. I need to think." She pushed through the door, stumbling as her mind tried to make sense of the chaos she was feeling. Every step was heavy, the weight of the truth pressing down on her like 1,000 bricks. She barely made it out of the house before she collapsed against the front porch railing, gasping for air. The cool night air hit her like a slap to the face. The darkness around her felt like a blanket, suffocating, but it was the only thing she could control. She closed her eyes and tried to focus on her breathing, the familiar rhythm she had always turned to in moments of panic. In and out. In and out. But the truth was like a hammer to her chest, unrelenting. Her mind kept returning to the same, haunting thought. How? How could this have happened? The world felt unrecognizable. She thought of all the years she had spent with this man, her husband. The family they had built. The trust they had shared. And now she was expected to accept that he was not just her partner, but someone far more complicated, far more tangled in her life than she had ever known. The coldness of the night seeped into her bones, but she couldn't move. She just stood there, frozen, her body a heavy weight. Her chest felt tight, and the nausea that had been threatening to rise within her finally surfaced. She bent over, clutching her stomach, struggling to keep it together. In the distance, she heard the sound of footsteps. Her heart skipped a beat, and she wiped her face with the back of her hand, trying to compose herself. The last thing she needed was for anyone to see her like this, weak, vulnerable. But when she turned, she saw who it was. Her husband. Her father. He was standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. He looked like he had aged a decade in the few minutes since their conversation had ended. He wasn't rushing toward her, but there was a quiet urgency in his step. His face was a mixture of concern and guilt, and she couldn't bring herself to look at him. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and confusion. He stopped a few feet away, not daring to come any closer. His eyes were full of pain, but she couldn't bring herself to feel any sympathy for him. She wanted to scream at him, but all the words caught in her throat, tangled in the mess of emotions threatening to take over her. "I just want to explain," he said quietly, his voice shaking. "Please. Let me explain." She didn't say anything for a long moment, her mind racing. What could he possibly say that would make this better? How could he explain away the years of lies, the deception, the betrayal? But then she remembered something that made her stomach twist even more. "What about my mother?" she asked, her voice soft but piercing. "What about her? What does she have to do with this?" His face faltered. He hesitated, then slowly stepped closer. "She's known. She's known for a long time." She stared at him in disbelief. "She knew?" Her voice cracked with the weight of the question. "She knew and didn't tell me? Why?" His shoulders slumped, and he finally met her gaze. "It wasn't easy. She didn't know how to tell you. She didn't want to hurt you. We thought it would be better if you never knew. But it's been eating at both of us, all these years. We couldn't keep the truth from you forever." She closed her eyes, trying to shut out the rawness of the conversation. It was too much. She couldn't process it all at once. Everything she had ever known was collapsing, and the foundation she had built her life on was crumbling beneath her feet. "I don't know what to believe anymore," she whispered, her voice broken. "How could you do this to me? To us? I never wanted it to happen like this," he said, his voice thick with regret. "But it did. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Her eyes stung with tears she hadn't yet allowed herself to shed. She wiped them away quickly, trying to maintain some semblance of control. But she was losing herself in the storm of emotions. She had trusted him, loved him, and now everything was in question. "I need time," she said quietly, her voice barely audible. "I need time to think. To figure this out." He nodded slowly, his face full of understanding and guilt. He didn't try to stop her as she turned and walked away, her mind a blur of thoughts, emotions, and unanswered questions. As she walked down the driveway, she tried to focus on one thing, just one thing, that would make sense of everything. But it wasn't possible. Not yet. She needed answers, but even more than that, she needed something she had never had before in her life. The truth. The days following the revelations were a blur, each one passing like a slow-moving storm. She had tried to return to her normal routine, to pretend that nothing had changed, but it was impossible. Every corner of the house held a memory, a whisper of the past, and now it all felt contaminated by the truth she had uncovered. Her life, once solid and predictable, now felt like it was falling apart, and she was powerless to stop it. Her husband, no, her father, had given her space, respecting her need to process everything in silence. He hadn't pushed for answers or explanations. Instead, he waited, as if he believed that time would make things clearer. But time wasn't helping. Every day, the weight of the truth seemed to press harder against her chest, suffocating her. She could barely breathe, let alone think. She spent hours wandering the house, lost in her own thoughts. The walls seemed to close in on her with every passing moment, as if they were silently mocking her. She no longer knew who to trust. Her mother had known all along, but she had never said a word. How could they keep such a monumental secret from her? But even more than that, the question that kept circling her mind, driving her mad, was this: why had they kept it from her? Why had they chosen to lie? What had been the point? And why, after all these years, had it all come to light? The guilt was suffocating. She had always been the good daughter, the one who did everything right. She had never asked questions. Never suspected anything. And now? Now everything felt like a lie. She didn't want to confront them, not yet. Not until she had answers of her own. She needed clarity, something to make sense of it all. But every time she tried to think, her mind became a tangled mess of confusion and anger. There were too many emotions, too many questions without answers. One morning, as she sat in the kitchen, staring at the untouched cup of coffee in front of her, she heard the sound of footsteps approaching. She didn't have to look up to know who it was. Her husband, her father, stood in the doorway, his hands resting nervously at his sides. She didn't acknowledge him, didn't look at him. She simply stared at the coffee, her fingers tracing the rim of the cup. "I know you don't want to talk to me," he said quietly, his voice full of regret. "But I think it's time we have that conversation." She didn't answer. The silence stretched between them, heavy and unyielding. "You've been avoiding me," he continued, his voice breaking slightly. "I understand why. I need to explain everything. To you. To us. I think we need to understand each other better if we're going to move forward." His words should have been comforting, but they only made her feel more trapped. What was she supposed to say? That she understood? That she could forgive him for this betrayal? That she could somehow accept the reality of what had happened? She shook her head, as if trying to clear her thoughts, and finally turned to face him. Her heart was pounding in her chest, and for a moment, she wasn't sure if she was angry or devastated. The truth was, she was both. "What is there to explain?" she said, her voice cold and flat. "What could you possibly say that would make this better? That would make it okay?" He winced at her words, but didn't retreat. He took a step forward, his eyes pleading. "I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted to put you in this position. But it wasn't just my decision. Your mother, she made the choice, too." She stared at him, the anger building inside her. "You both made the choice to keep this from me. You both chose to lie. For years." He nodded, his face filled with remorse. "I know. And I hate myself for it. But it wasn't as simple as just telling you. There were things we were trying to protect you from. Things that we didn't want you to have to carry." Her fists clenched, and she stood up from the table, needing space, needing distance. "Protect me? From what? From the truth? From this?" She gestured around the room, as if the entire world had shifted under her feet. What about my life? What about the lies I've been living? Was I supposed to be happy in that? He stepped closer, his eyes filled with pain. We didn't want you to lose everything. We thought that maybe, if we kept this secret, if we kept you safe from it, that you would have a life free from the burden. We wanted you to be happy. Her chest tightened as the tears she had been holding back for so long finally began to spill over. And now what? Now you think I can just forget everything? That I can just move on from this? I'm not a child anymore. I'm not someone who can just forget the truth because it's inconvenient for you. I never meant for this to happen, he said softly. But I don't want to lose you. Not now, not ever. She wiped the tears from her eyes, anger and confusion still bubbling within her. You've already lost me. All of you. My entire life was a lie. You're telling me you're my father now, but all I can see is the man I married. The man I trusted. And you're the one who's been hiding everything from me. His face crumbled, the pain in his eyes so raw, so deep, it almost made her falter. Almost. But she couldn't allow herself to feel sympathy. Not yet. Not when the weight of the betrayal was so heavy. I don't know how to fix this, he said quietly. But I'm here. If you'll let me. I'll be here, no matter what. She closed her eyes, trying to hold herself together. The storm inside her was raging, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. But she had to make a decision. Could she ever forgive him? Could she ever accept him as more than her husband? But then another thought struck her, an even more terrifying realization. What if the truth about her father was just the beginning? What if there were more secrets buried in her past, waiting to be uncovered? Her mother had been silent for days, and she hadn't reached out once. The silence between them was suffocating, and it only made the tension worse. What if her mother knew more than she was letting on? What if there were things her parents hadn't told her, things that were even darker than she could imagine? Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. It was a soft, tentative knock, but it was enough to pull her out of her head. She glanced at her father, whose expression had shifted to one of concern. "Who is it?" she asked, though she had a sinking feeling she already knew the answer. He stood frozen for a moment before slowly walking to the door. When he opened it, her mother stepped inside. Her eyes were red, her face drawn with exhaustion. She had clearly been crying. Her mother didn't speak at first. She simply stood there, looking at her, as if she were waiting for some sign that her daughter would welcome her. But there was no warmth in the air. No comfort. Her mother finally spoke, her voice trembling. "We need to talk." The air in the room seemed to thicken as her mother stepped over the threshold. It was as though time itself had momentarily frozen. For a moment, there was only silence. Her mother, standing with her shoulders hunched and her face pale, did not approach her. Instead, she simply stood there, her gaze fixed on her daughter, as if uncertain how to proceed. The silence was unbearable, and it only amplified the tension in the room. The weight of the past hung between them, a heavy, suffocating presence that neither one of them could escape. The protagonist stood, her heart pounding in her chest. She had been avoiding this moment, the moment where everything could either begin to heal or unravel completely. But now, with her mother standing there in front of her, it was impossible to avoid. "I don't know what to say," her mother finally spoke, her voice thin, strained, and full of pain. "I've wanted to tell you for so long. But I didn't know how. I didn't know if I ever could." Her mother's words hit her like a physical blow, and the anger that had been simmering inside her for days began to boil over. "How could you not tell me?" she snapped, her voice breaking. "How could you keep this from me? How could you lie to me for my entire life?" Her mother winced at her words, but she didn't retreat. She stood her ground, though her eyes were filled with regret. "It wasn't a lie. Not exactly. It was a choice. A decision we made, your father and I, to protect you from something I thought would destroy you. Destroy me, she repeated, incredulous. How could the truth destroy me? You destroyed me, not the truth. All of this, everything I thought I knew, it's all a lie. And now, you want to tell me you were trying to protect me? Her mother seemed to shrink under her gaze, her hands trembling at her sides. I was protecting you from the pain of it. The pain of knowing who your father really was, and how everything happened. It wasn't supposed to be like this. We had a plan. A plan to keep you safe. The words felt hollow, empty. A plan? She asked bitterly, shaking her head in disbelief. A plan to keep me in the dark? To let me live a life built on lies? Her mother's face crumpled, tears filling her eyes. I didn't know how else to do it. I didn't want to ruin your life. I thought I could protect you from the truth. I thought you'd be better off not knowing. The words felt like daggers in her heart. The betrayal was deeper than she had ever imagined, and yet she couldn't escape it. The man she had married, the life she had built, was a lie, and now, standing before her, was the woman who had helped weave that web of deception. You don't get it, she said quietly, her voice heavy with sorrow. You don't get what this has done to me. I don't even know who I am anymore. How am I supposed to look at you, at him, at anyone the same way? Everything is wrong. Her mother took a step toward her, her face filled with anguish. Please, don't say that. I love you. We both love you. We just didn't know how to protect you from the truth. We didn't know what else to do. The protagonist took a step back, shaking her head. Protect me? You lied to me for my entire life. You didn't protect me. You protected yourselves. And now I'm stuck with this horrible, painful truth that I never asked for. I know, her mother whispered. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But there's more you need to know. More than what you've heard so far. Her mother's words stopped her in her tracks. More? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. She couldn't help it. She felt a sickening dread in the pit of her stomach. How much worse could it get? Her mother nodded slowly, her face pale and her hands wringing together in nervous desperation. I'm not sure how to tell you this, but there's something you don't know. Something your father, your real father, never wanted you to find out. Her heart skipped a beat. The truth was already painful enough, but this new revelation felt like a shadow hanging over her, pulling her further into darkness. What do you mean? She asked, her voice quivering. What could be worse than what I've already learned? Her mother looked down, unable to meet her gaze. Your biological father, the man who was supposed to be your father, was involved in something far more dangerous than you could ever imagine. And it wasn't just your father that kept you from the truth. It was the people around him. The ones who protected him. The ones who knew what happened. She stared at her mother in confusion. What are you talking about? She asked sharply, her pulse quickening. What danger? What did he do? Her mother swallowed hard, visibly struggling to find the words. He wasn't just a man who had an affair. He was involved in something bigger, something much darker. Something that, if you knew about it, could have ruined your life, and maybe even taken it. The words hit her like a shock to her system. She could barely comprehend what her mother was saying. You're telling me that my real father, she choked on the words, her breath coming in shallow gasps, he was involved in something criminal? Dangerous? And you never told me? You let me live in the dark, thinking my life was normal, and you didn't warn me? Her mother's eyes filled with tears. I didn't know how. I didn't know how to tell you what had happened. He was trying to protect you, too. But the people he was involved with, they were dangerous. And when he realized the danger he had put you in, he made the hardest decision of his life. Her head spun. The pieces were slowly falling into place, but they made no sense. The man she had married, the man she thought was her father, wasn't the man she thought he was at all. But now her biological father, the one she had thought dead, had been hiding something. Something so dark and dangerous that it could destroy everything she had built. Her thoughts were interrupted by a voice, her husband's voice, but different now. It was filled with desperation and an edge of regret she had never heard before. "Please, listen to her," he said, stepping into the room. "Everything your mother is saying is true. I wanted to protect you, to keep you safe. But the truth was far more dangerous than I ever imagined." She looked at him, seeing the man who had once been her partner, her confidant, but now felt like a stranger. "What are you saying?" she asked, her voice trembling with confusion and fear. He walked toward her slowly, his face tense with worry. "I'm saying that your real father, he made mistakes. But he wasn't a bad man. He just got involved in things he shouldn't have. Things that spiraled out of control." Her head was spinning. "What kind of things? What are you telling me?" "Things I can't fully explain," he said, looking at her with sadness in his eyes. "But I can tell you this, your real father did try to protect you. And when he realized how much danger you were in, he took steps to make sure you were kept away from it. He gave up everything for you." "But why didn't he come back?" she whispered, almost afraid to ask. "Why didn't he come back for me? Why leave me with you, with this life?" Her father, her biological father, looked down at the floor, his face full of guilt. "Because it wasn't safe. The people he was running from, he couldn't risk bringing you into that. He thought you would be better off without him in your life. And he thought I could protect you. But you didn't," she said bitterly. "You didn't protect me. And now you're telling me the man I thought was dead was running from dangerous people? That he gave up his life for mine? How could he do that? How could you all do that?" Her mother reached out to her, her eyes filled with sorrow. "We didn't have a choice. We had to make sacrifices. But we did it all for you. Please, understand." She stepped back, shaking her head. The weight of everything was too much to bear. "I don't know what to believe anymore. I don't know who to trust." Her mother's voice softened. "Just give us a chance. Let us show you the truth, the whole truth. It's the only way we can move forward." But she couldn't. Not yet. She needed time to process, time to understand what had been hidden from her. The truth was too much to face all at once, and she couldn't let it define her future. With a heavy heart, she turned away from them. "I need to be alone," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I need time to think." As she walked away, the weight of everything, of the lies, the betrayal, the uncertainty, crushed her, and she felt herself slipping further into the darkness. The world felt like it was spinning out of control. Each moment dragged on, each second heavier than the last. The days blurred into one another, but the sense of dread that had settled in her chest never wavered. The silence between her and her parents had become unbearable, suffocating. The weight of the truth they had forced upon her still felt raw and unsettling, like a jagged wound that refused to heal. She tried to keep up appearances, to move through the motions of daily life, but the lies, the secrets, the betrayal, they loomed over her like a storm cloud, darkening everything. Her mind raced, spinning through the conflicting emotions that warred within her. She didn't know who she was anymore, who to trust, or where to turn. Each time she looked at her mother or her father, her biological father, she saw nothing but the echoes of their lies. Their pain was clear, and she could see the remorse in their eyes, but it didn't make it easier. Nothing could make it easier. Her body felt tired, worn out from the constant mental and emotional strain. She couldn't sleep. The memories of the past week, the discoveries, the revelations, it was all too much. And yet, the nagging feeling that there was still more to uncover, more to understand, gnawed at her. She found herself standing on the balcony one evening, staring out at the vast, dark sky above her. The cold wind brushed against her face, but it couldn't clear the fog in her mind. The stars twinkled above her, distant and indifferent, offering no comfort. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a door opening behind her. She didn't turn to see who it was. She already knew. Her mother had always been the one to reach out when silence threatened to engulf everything. But this time, the silence between them was different. This time, her mother had more to say, something that might change everything. Her mother stepped beside her, standing just a few feet away. She didn't speak at first, as if she, too, were grappling with the words that had eluded her for so long. Finally, after a long pause, her voice broke the quiet. "You've been avoiding me," her mother said softly, her tone heavy with guilt. "I understand why. But I can't let it stay like this, not anymore." Her daughter didn't respond, her gaze still fixed on the horizon. She wasn't ready to face her yet, not after everything that had been revealed, not when she was still reeling from the shock of learning the truth. "I've been thinking about what I told you," her mother continued, her voice breaking slightly. "And I realize that I haven't given you enough. I haven't given you the full story. I've kept so much from you for so long, and I think it's time for me to tell you everything." The words felt like a weight settling into her chest. She knew what was coming. The part of the truth she had feared, the part she hadn't been ready to face. But it had to come. It had to be said. "I don't think I can handle any more," she whispered, her voice tight. "How much more is there, really? How much more can I take?" Her mother took a slow breath, her own voice thick with emotion. "I don't know, sweetie. But you deserve to know everything. You deserve the truth." She turned to face her mother then, her eyes filled with frustration and sorrow. "What more could there possibly be? What could be worse than everything you've already told me?" Her mother closed her eyes, as though gathering the strength to speak. "It's about your biological father. There are things about him, about his past, that you need to understand. Things I never wanted you to know because they would have hurt you, but now I realize that keeping this from you was wrong. You need to know who he was, what he was involved in." Her heart pounded. She wanted to scream, to shut it all out. But she knew she couldn't. She had to listen. She had to hear the rest of the story, no matter how painful it would be. "Your real father, the man you think of as your biological father, was a part of something far worse than you've been told. I told you before that he was involved in dangerous people, but it wasn't just a mistake, sweetie. It was a betrayal. And he wasn't alone. There were others, people who had the power to destroy him and anyone he was close to. And that's why he left." Her mother's words hung in the air, cold and heavy. Her biological father had not just been involved in something dangerous, he had been running from something. And it wasn't just for his own safety, it had been for hers, too. She could feel the sting of the betrayal, even as her mother's voice continued, steady but filled with the weight of all that had been left unsaid. "It wasn't just about protecting you from the danger. It was also about keeping you away from the past he couldn't escape," her mother continued. "He knew that if you found out who he really was, who he had been involved with, you would be in danger, too. There were people after him. People who would stop at nothing to destroy him, and anyone who was close to him. He thought it was better for you to grow up without knowing the truth. Without being dragged into the mess he had created." Her heart was racing, and her mind was spinning. The pieces of the puzzle that had never quite fit began to fall into place, but the picture they created was more horrifying than she had ever imagined. "Why didn't you tell me this sooner?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why did you keep this from me?" Her mother's face crumpled in pain. Because I thought I was doing what was best for you. I thought if I kept you away from it, you'd be safe. But I was wrong. I was wrong to protect you from the truth." Her mother reached out, her hand trembling, but she didn't touch her. Instead, her fingers hovered in the air between them, as if unsure whether to cross the boundary they had built over the years. "I was trying to protect you from the danger of it all," her mother whispered, "but I see now that the biggest danger is living with the lies. With all the things I've kept hidden from you." Tears burned in her eyes as she processed the weight of it all. She had never wanted to hear the truth. She had never wanted her world to be shattered in this way. But here she was, facing it all, and no amount of anger or denial would change it. "I don't know what to do with this," she said softly, the words escaping her like a confession. "I don't know what to do with all this pain, with all these questions that have no answers. I don't know how to forgive any of you." Her mother stood silently, her face filled with sorrow and regret. But she didn't try to offer comfort or explanations. She simply stood there, as if allowing her daughter the space she needed to process it all. Her mind raced, jumping from one question to the next. How could her biological father, her real father, have been involved in such a web of lies and danger? Who had he been running from? And most importantly, how was she supposed to live with the knowledge that her entire life had been built on a foundation of deception? But then another thought came to her, one that shifted everything into a new perspective. What if this wasn't the end? What if the truth, as painful as it was, could be the beginning of something new? What if, by confronting all the lies and the betrayal, she could rebuild her life, find a way to move forward with the knowledge that she had faced the darkest parts of her past and come out on the other side? With a deep breath, she turned to her mother, her voice steadier than before. "I need time," she said, her words firm. "I need time to process everything you've said, to think about all of this. But I also need to know one thing: what happened to him? What happened to my real father?" Her mother's eyes filled with sadness, and she hesitated before answering. "He's gone, sweetheart. He made sure you were safe, and then he disappeared. We never heard from him again." "Gone?" she repeated, her heart sinking. "What do you mean by gone?" Her mother swallowed hard. "I mean, gone. I don't know where he is. After he made sure you were safe, he left. He disappeared. And no one knew where he went. No one knows if he's alive or dead." The finality of her mother's words struck her like a blow to the chest. It was as if a chapter of her life, a chapter that had been left open for years, had finally come to an end. Her biological father, her real father, was gone, and with him, all the answers she had longed for. She stood there for a long time, her thoughts swirling in a haze of confusion and disbelief. But in that moment, something shifted inside her. She couldn't keep running from the truth. She couldn't keep hiding from the past. It was time to face everything head-on and find a way to move forward, no matter how difficult that journey might be. "I'm not sure what the future holds," she said quietly, "but I'm ready to find out. I'm ready to face it all." Her mother nodded, tears in her eyes. "And I'll be here, no matter what. We'll face it together." And with that, as the night stretched on around them, the weight of the past began to lift, ever so slightly. The storm inside her had not yet passed, but for the first time in a long time, she could see the faintest glimmer of hope through the clouds.